this video we're going to talk about 3D objects in Cinema 4D. So in the previous video we talked about 2D shapes and also lines and splines and all sorts of parameters to create many different types of vector graphics. And also you can export these, you can export them into, for example, AutoCAD, or you can export it for a BIM software to create some architecture projects, but also you can use it for graphic design if you export them for Adobe Illustrator use, for example. So let me show you how you can do that just quickly, and then we will proceed with the 3D objects. So for example, this can be good for BIM or CAD. So I can select them using the rectangular selection here. I will select these shapes here, and well, I can also select only those. Okay, and then I will go to File, Export, and use the DXF. This is a file that can be used for AutoCAD or Revit or ArchiCAD or wherever. So here you can use the presets, or you can change the parameters, and you can use polyline because these are closed shapes, but also you can export them as solids or as 3D face. But if you want to do something 2D, you can export as polylines, and I already created the Excel file which is for AutoCAD, as you can see here. So just save and you're good to go. Now it's a little bit more complex if you need to export for Illustrator. So if you want to import these shapes for graphic design in Illustrator, these vector graphics, you need to select them and do the same thing that we did with AutoCAD, but with one difference. We need to go here in the settings, in the render settings, and go to the effect and look for the sketch and tune effect. So you need to activate the sketch and tune, and you need to select what you want to export or what you want to visualize with this sketch and tune. And I want to visualize the splines, so I need to activate this. And then you are good to go. So you go to File, Export, and go to Adobe Illustrator. There you go. So it's AI, and here also you have some different settings that you can do if you want, or just select the default. Well, especially take a look here at lines, surfaces, but right now we are only selecting lines, so say OK, and in this case I created another folder. Well, I can call this, for example, AI, and here I'm gonna save this as vector graphics. Now these are not SVG, which is scalable vector graphics, but yes, they're scalable as well. Now vector graphics, for the ones who don't know, are kind of graphics that can be scaled and without never losing quality. So it's different from raster images and pixels that if scaled too much are gonna lose quality and you're gonna see big pixels. So this is what vector graphics it's all about. Now let's go for the part concerning the 3D object. So I'm gonna delete everything here and start from the beginning, and this is gonna be the lesson 5, and go to the create. You can also use the null object which we introduced in the previous video with the 3D objects as well. You can create groups with this. So let's call this first 3D solids. Okay. First, I missed an R. And let's get started. So I'm going to go here to mesh primitives. I'm gonna click on this little stripe to extract this, and I'm gonna click this and dock it somewhere in the interface. And also I want a little bit more space here on the right side as well, because I want to see the attributes, which are really important here, because these are all parametric objects, just like the shapes that we saw in the previous video. So they work with parameters and with attributes. So let's get started with the text. Now, yes, we already saw the text before, but I want to add something really important here. So I will type again Cinema 4D, and also I will select a font to use with this text, and I have a favorite one, which is this one here. And there you go. Now, we saw that we can change here the size. We can, just like in the 2D version, but we also have the depth, so we can increase the depth. And this is an actual measure, so it's centimeters. So if I type here 100, it means it's gonna be 1 meter deep, and this is a precise measure. So we are working with precision here using the units. Okay, then you have this subdivision. So let me show you, well, I'm gonna switch back to the 4 views. Let me show you what happens if I increase the subdivisions. You can see that the lines inside the object are increasing. Now this is the structure. These are the polygons which are part of my model, and this is really important. Segments are really important, and subdivisions, because we will see later on that they will help us with the curved surfaces, basically. So we will get back to this later on. Now let me show you something else here which we didn't see already. So we already saw the basic tab, the coordinates. Again, we can scale these, rotate using precise measures. And here in object, we saw the standard text parameters. Now we also have caps. Caps are really important because we can add an extra effect here. So if we go to the sides and increase the size here, look what's gonna happen to the text. It's gonna have these nice rounded corners instead of having sharp corners, and this is gonna look way more realistic when we do a render. So don't exaggerate with the sides, just leave it in an appropriate way like that. And also you can define the segments inside that rounded corner there, that cap. So if I zoom in here, I can see that I'm using what is called a chamfer, so it's a straight cut. But if I increase the segments here, it's gonna become a curve. So the more segments I add here, the more curvy will be this shape here. So this is the importance of having different, or many segments or few segments, depending on how soft, how curvy you want your object and your surface. Okay, you can also bevel outside. This is gonna mean that it's gonna increase the size of the text. And you can also check our other stuff here. For example, you can triangle everything, or you can not triangle or use another way. And again, this is all about the 3D objects and the meshes, which are 3D objects composed by faces, by polygons. It's all about faces and polygons. Now let's move on to the next one. I'm gonna bring this a little bit higher. Okay, so you want to do something kind of middle ground between graphic design and architecture. So next one is going to be the cube. Now cube can become anything, can become, for example, a pavement. You can increase the size here by clicking with the left mouse on these yellow little squares, and you can see here I'm kind of trying to create a pavement for a scene. And of course I can use the 4 views. These are gonna help a lot to define the sides of something. Okay, and also you can position these precisely using, again, the coordinates. So let's say that this is a pavement. If I go here in the object, I have realistic measures. So for example, a pavement usually is 30 centimeters. So I'm gonna type here 30, and this is gonna be perfectly 30 centimeter high, or let's call it a thickness. So if I want to place this here, I can do it precisely. So if I say 0, this is gonna be, you need to see where the pivot is, so where these axes are. So in the middle, in the really center of the object, that's the pivot right there. But if I want to place it at 0, I need to go here and say -15. So this is gonna be exactly epsilon 0, basically. So it's gonna be exactly on the ground, on the grid plane that you see there. That's the construction plane, by the way. But we're gonna talk about those later on as well. Let's stick with the more simple stuff. So I can create here another cube, and now I can move it up, I can scale it, and I can create, for example, a pillar or a column. There you go. And I can give also to this a precise measure. So I want to do a column, so it's gonna be like 300 centimeters. So it's gonna be 3 meters and 30 times 30 for the base. But be careful there, because it's way beyond here. So I need to move it up and place it on top of this pavement. Now you can do this using the views. You don't need to be precise every time, because precision also takes time. So if you need to do a render, you just need to make sure that this is really close to the pavement, not inside. Well, you can actually go a little bit inside. Now the only thing you need to avoid is to go all the way through the pavement, so to go on the other side, or to be too high, so that it's gonna show that it's gonna be like a flying object. So it needs to be really close enough that you don't see there the trick. So in this way you can work fast. Otherwise, I will show you later on how you can use the snaps, and those will help you to work with precision, but more slowly. Now I want to make a copy of this, and let's go to the next one. And also here you can see I have segments, but you can see that if I increase segments, there is no difference between this one here and this one here. They are the same. It's the same pillar, but this one here has like 1,000 polygons. This one here has 6, but the look here is exactly the same. So avoid to increase segments if not needed, only when you need them. And usually you will need the segments when you have curvy objects, not in this case. And I'm gonna show you this with a cylinder. Now, before we get into the cylinder, I just want to show you that also here we have the fillet, which is basically rounding the corners. So if you round the corners here as well, you can also just set one subdivision, and that's gonna be enough to give a little bit more realism to your column. So just look at the first column and just look at the second one. The second one is gonna look more realistic because it has this really small fillet. Now, in reality, we don't have straight corners. We always have a small fillet somewhere, or a small chamfer. So always make sure that you don't have any straight corners. Just round everything up, and it's gonna look more realistic and nice in the render. You can just run a render right away like this. Okay, now we have the tune effect actually. So let's deactivate the sketch and tune. Now you can also export this thing here in Illustrator. If you have sketch and tune, you can export also 3D. And if you deactivate that and re-render, you can see here that the second one, looking closer, is gonna be just a little bit more realistic than the first one. That's it. This is all about the fillet corners or rounded corners. Now we also have another effect which is called the Phong, but I'm gonna show you this in the cylinder because it's gonna be more visible. So I want to create here another column, and again I will use these handles to scale. Well, I'm not scaling here actually, so be careful because scaling is this one here. Right here, when you are using the yellow handles, you are actually changing the parameters, which again are realistic. So this is centimeters, and again I want to do a 300 centimeters column or pillar and place it there on the pavement. So you can see here that in the cylinder I already have some subdivisions, some segments, And this will be helpful here to give me that nice and smooth curvy surface. Now let me copy this by holding Ctrl and moving. I will copy this and decrease the segments. Well, not the height segments. I don't need now the height segments. But look what happens if I change the rotation segment. So if I click here and scroll, this is gonna look like a prism. There you go, it's not rounded anymore. Now if I increase a little bit, let's say that after, you can see here, after 6 or 7 sides, it's gonna be smooth. It's gonna magically change its appearance and it's gonna be smooth. And this is thanks to the Phong effect. Now the Phong, it's an effect. It's called the Phong effect. It's not real. So if I decrease this Phong angle, for example, to 0, you can actually see the trick there. So this is something that it's deceiving your eye. So this is the actual object, but if I copy this and reapply the Phong by increasing the angle, you can see here the fake curviness of that surface. That's not actually curved. It's this one here. These two are the same. Just the second one has the Phong effect applied. Now, if you're going to print these two in 3D with a 3D printer, this is how it's gonna look. It's not gonna look like this. So if you want this to look like this, you need to deactivate the Phong and increase the rotation segments or subdivisions a lot, like that. Now this is actually a rounded or a curvy surface made of a lot of polygons. Okay, now let's move back to the first pillar here, and also here we have caps, so we can add a little bit of this fillet effect, not too much. It has to be an architectural element, so it cannot be too smooth, but you can see here how you can change this and make it look more realistic, or also you can make something more exaggerated if you want. Depends on your ideas on the project. Okay, and also we have the slice. No, slice is gonna let me create, you can see here, like a pie, when I can use only a part of that cylinder and not the whole object. So it's another feature. Now, just like the 2D shapes, also here, try to experiment with all parameters, because there are a lot of things to discover here in these many different objects. Now, I cannot show you everything, but you get the idea here. So I will just show you some of these. For example, I want to show you the sphere, and again, you can change the radius here and the segments, and that's the same thing about the curviness that we were talking about and the Phong effect. So this is just the limit. Well, let me show you here by zooming a little bit. So you can see that we have two faces here, 1 and 2. Now this is the angle, and right now this angle here is, well, it's higher than 11 degrees. So if I increase this, for example, to 20, and this becomes smooth, is because this angle is lower than 20. So it's kind of difficult to understand probably, but you can definitely see that the result if you just play around with this. You can see how it's gonna smooth to a certain angle. Okay, this is just to explain to you the effect, then you can again experiment. Now I want to show you also the polygon here. I think this is something interesting. This is a single polygon, but you can increase the segments also in here. Let me show you that here in the view. There you go. So I have some more subdivisions, and I also can scale this up a little bit more. Well, I'm talking about scaling, but this is not scaling. It's kind of resizing the width and the height. And I want to show you the difference between a standard polygonal object and the Bezier version here. Okay, I want this to be also in vertical, so I'm gonna place it like this and make it approximately the same size. Now this one here is Bezier, and this one here also has its own subdivisions. You can see it has more subdivisions at the moment. It's 24 times 24. I can do the same thing here if I want, increase a little bit the segments. And this one also has, the Bezier also has grid points. And where are my grid points? I'm not seeing those right now. To see the grid points, I need to go here in the sub-selection or the modes and select the points, just as we did with the splines. And now I can move these around. I can select these points and create something really more complex than what we have seen so far. So this is a single surface, it's not a solid, and you can see what I can do here. It's like creating a working with a kind of a tissue or a cloth. Okay, now if I do the same thing here, well, first I need to exit this selection mode, so I need to go to the object mode and select this other one here. And if I try to do the same thing with the points, first of all, I don't see any points. Why? Because this is not editable yet. To make it editable, I need to press the C key on my keyboard. And now I can see all the different points that I can edit. But look, if I, for example, select the corners, just as I did with the Bezier surface, and move them back, now the effect is totally different. So this is the difference between a standard polygon and the Bezier. And let's move on. We're gonna get back to this. This is actually the starting point of polygonal modeling, basically. So we're gonna get to that later in other lessons. Now you can see here we have others that you can experiment yourself. This one here, it's kind of fun, it's kind of figure. And we also have this one here is really interesting. It's called landscape, and it's gonna kind of generate a random terrain. So you can change the scale here, you can change a lot of parameters. Well, really, you just need to go here and play around. You will find a lot of different results. Also, you can do this in the spherical way. So you kind of create this strange ball. I don't know how we can call it, but you can see it there. You can play around a lot. And well, these are pretty standard, so you can experiment yourself. The tube, it's really interesting because with the tube you can do a lot of stuff. I personally use it for architecture as well. So let me change the orientation first. And then also here we have the slice. So if I use this, for example, from 180 to 360, I can create kind of an architectural arc. And I can change here the two sizes here, and I can also create, for example, a tunnel like that. So it's pretty versatile. You can do a lot of stuff with this. You can also deactivate the Phong as well if you want to have something more rigid, and you can change the number of segments. So to have different, you can create, I don't know, something kind of a bridge, or well, now the limit is just your fantasy. Just experiment with all these, because then your brain is going to kind of start to work by itself to understand what types of different combination you can use, which type of parameters you can use to create your 3D scene, your first 3D scenes. So just play around here. Just create all of these shapes and play around with the parameters, and you will find a lot of hidden treasures. So again, really your only limit here is your fantasy. So also please, if you want, you can write some suggestions to other users on how to use these tools in the comments. Also, you can ask questions, but probably most of the questions will be answered later on in the video course. And also please subscribe to the channel or join the channel to support us. Check our other video courses and video guides, and stay tuned for more videos. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.